I'm Stephanie Gilmore, Curator of Collections at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Today, as part of our Small Wonders video program, I'm going to share artifacts and history about the Galloping Geese and the Rio Grande Southern. The Rio Grande Southern, or RGS, is well represented here at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Notable pieces among our rolling stock include 3 Galloping Goose motor cars, Locomotive No. 20, and business car Rico, among others. In addition, we also have several small artifacts in our collection and many archival items in our library. For a railroad that only covered 162 miles of track, the RGS had quite an impact on Colorado history. Before we get into our artifacts of the RGS, we first need to cover a little background. In 1887, Otto Mears founded the narrow-gauge Silverton Railroad in order to serve the mines north of Silverton, Colorado. Track for this railroad stretched from Silverton to Albany, but Mears wanted to make it all the way to Ouray. However, those last few miles between Albany and Ouray were impossible for a railroad due to the steep grades and a narrow canyon. To close this short gap in one of the state's richest mining areas, Mears soon started the Rio Grande Southern Railroad in 1890. It stretched 162 miles from Durango to Ouray, which was quite the detour for that small stretch between Albany and Ouray. Like his Silverton Railroad, the RGS started out transporting silver ore, workers, and supplies from the many prolific mining towns in the San Juan region. It was a very successful railroad, but only for a few years until the silver panic of 1893. Due to the sudden drop in the value of silver at that time, Mears was no longer able to control the RGS. And while the Denver and Rio Grande had controlling interests, the RGS went into receivership. Under the control of the Denver and Rio Grande, the RGS would continue to haul livestock, coal, lumber, ore, and passengers until 1951. One of our artifact collections, which we have already covered in a Small Wonders video, is our collection of silver and buckskin rail passes for the Silverton and Rio Grande railroads. These passes were issued by Otto Mears between 1888 and 1892, during the earliest years of the Silverton and Rio Grande Southern railroads. You can view our previous video about these fabulous passes through the link in the comments to this video. For this video chapter, however, we are focusing on the later years of the Rio Grande Southern. The Great Depression, like the Panic of 1893, had quite an impact on the Rio Grande Southern. At that time, the RGS nearly had to cease operations due to the high cost of coal and the labor to operate steam locomotives. However, in spite of these challenges, the railroad was still expected to carry mail and passengers. In 1931, Chief Mechanic Jack Odenbaugh devised a solution to the problem. He created a vehicle that could run on gasoline, ride on railroad tracks, and that could be operated by just about anybody who could drive a car. Odenbaugh devised what we would call a mashup in this day and age. His first conception was a motor car that featured a Buick engine with a flatbed on which a stake body had been built. 6 more similar motor cars would be built between 1931 and 1936. With either Buick or Pierce Arrow engines and open or closed truck bodies, these motor cars would affectionately be called the Galloping Geese. This name came about due to the appearance of the cars as they opened their hoods to vent, which resembled the wings of a goose, and then the way that they waddled along the rather uneven rails of the Rio Grande Southern. Even the horn sounded a bit like a goose's honk. Within the artifact collection at the Colorado Railroad Museum, we have several artifacts and archives which relate to the later years of the Rio Grande Southern in the 20th century, including numerous things relating to the Galloping Geese. Our first featured artifact is this G-scale Galloping Goose No. 6, which includes a truck flatbed akin to the first Galloping Goose motor car designed by Jack Odenbaugh in 1931. We happen to have the life-size Goose No. 6 in our rolling stock collection, along with 2 other Galloping Goose motor cars, numbers 2 and 7. Goose number 6 was used as a work car for inspections, maintenance, and even as a helper. Next, we have this detailed painting of Goose number 7 near Lizard Head Pass, which at 10,500 feet was the highest pass on the Rio Grande Southern. This was painted by artist Gil Bennett in 1999. A trained industrial artist, Gil Bennett became inspired to paint trains after meeting and working with another industrial artist featured in our collections, Howard Fogg. Speaking of Lizard Head, we also have one of the signs from the pass itself, which is on display at the museum. We do not know the date of this sign, but the estimated guess is sometime in the early 20th century. This pass, as seen in the previously mentioned painting, is also the subject of many historic photographs. Perhaps the most famous photographer to capture it was William Henry Jackson, as seen in this image from the late 19th century. Another interesting sign we have is this Galloping Goose sign, featuring an image of Galloping Goose number 4. It was originally displayed on a Rio Grande Southern office building in Ridgeway in 1951. Apparently handmade, upon close examination the sign appears to have been repurposed from a Coors beer sign, as there is a ghost image of the Coors logo just under the paint. We believe our founder, Bob Richardson, collected this from Ridgeway in the 1950s. The last artifact we have is a fascinating little mystery. It is a small painting, roughly the size of a postcard, of Ridgeway Depot. We discovered that although it has no known provenance, it is a highly detailed copy of a photograph of the depot at Ridgeway, Colorado, taken by Russ Treptow on June 5, 1942. That photograph happens to be featured on page 177 of the book The Rio Grande Southern II, an Ultimate Pictorial Study, by Richard L. Dorman. In the photo you can read Ridgeway on the depot and 316 on the engine. Goose number 7 also sits to the left of the depot. Sadly, we have no information on who painted this lovely piece, but nonetheless we're delighted to have it in our collection. If you are interested in studying the Rio Grande Southern, or its unique Galloping Goose motor cars, we invite you to visit the Richardson Library here at the museum. In addition to the aforementioned artifacts, we have extensive archival and photograph collections from prominent rail photographers such as Dick Kindig, Ed Haley, and Jackson Thode, among others. These photographers caught some of the last days of steam over the Rio Grande Southern through their images, and we are fortunate to have many of their images in the collections. We hope you've enjoyed our brief history of the Rio Grande Southern and its related artifacts and archives at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Commenting and sharing in particular may qualify as virtual engagements for important funding programs like the SCFD.